see that lone star from 1,000 miles.
Fallout New Vegas is my favorite game of all time. At least it's in my top 3. This isn't exactly a controversial opinion, however, with the Rush sleeper hit coming out in 2010 and taking the Fallout community and the greater gaming community at large by storm, even despite the awful launch, bugs-wise at least. Bringing the franchise that had begun in the 90s, recently revived by Bethesda with Fallout 3, to the dusty plains of the Nevada desert and being so obviously inspired by the Wild West, New Vegas managed to blend the retro-futuristic post-apocalyptic nature of Fallout perfectly with the more spaghetti western style of the Mojave Wasteland. Crawling out of an early grave, both launch-wise and story-wise, the game revolves around searching for revenge against the one who shot you, as you trapeze across the Mojave Desert in Nevada, a huge beige wasteland filled to the brim with shit to do. It's honestly no wonder New Vegas becomes such a classic. I mean, just look at this. You want to just find the guy who shot you and do the main quest? You can, but you want to go off the beaten path? Find specimens for a fight club ruled by a very strange woman? Check. Do you want to procure prostitutes for a post-apocalyptic brothel, including a robot and a half-corpse dominatrix? Check. Do you even want to help a cult of half-dead astronauts get into a rocket and fly somewhere indeterminable, or even sabotage them and let them all die? Check and check. New Vegas as a game is packed full of choice and freedom, and that is the idea in which I want to explore today. I want to explore how exactly the game expresses this freedom, what you can do with it, and the overall effect that it has on the game, but also on how it affects the overall experience while playing the game. But first, of course, comes the obligatory shill. If you've enjoyed the video so far, or if you do enjoy the video at any point, please do consider liking and subscribing. You don't have to, but it would help immensely. I also have a Twitter account where I post updates on both my life and my future videos, so if you want to check that out, the link's down below, alongside my Patreon. But moving on without further ado, let us get into today's video by first examining the game's narrative. The game opens with you, a courier, dying. Well, not really, but it starts with a cutscene of you being bound and gagged and then executed by a man in a checkered suit surrounded by a rougher looking group of people. You wake in a room, a doctor's office, being tended to by a man known as Doc Mitchell, who helps you regain your faculties and create your character before sending you off into the town of Goodsprings to do, well, whatever you want. Whilst it's undeniable that New Vegas has an amazing hook to the story, who is this man? Who shot you? What's the chip that he was on about? Why me? That inevitably leaves you asking questions and seeking answers. The game doesn't railroad you into searching for them, however. Instead, you are free to do whatever you want to do in the wasteland that is now open to you. But first, the game instructs you to go to the local saloon to receive the tutorial. We do this, heading into the building and completing it, with a character known as Sunny Smiles, but as you return to the building, you are met with a scene of an argument between the owner, Trudy, and an escaped convict from the local NCR correctional facility, Joe Cobb. It is this quest, Ghost Town Gunfight, that first demonstrates this idea of freedom that today's video is centered around. The quest begins as you talk to Trudy, or Joe Cobb, but we'll get into that part shortly, as she tells you of how the town is harboring a man known as Ringo that the local escaped convicts, a gang known as the Powder Gangers, want dead. You are then tasked with organizing the town to defend against the gang, talking to various people and using your skill points to pass skill checks. For example, using barter, you can sway the proprietor of the local general store to outfit the defenders of the town with better armor and weapons, or you can convince an old man that you can be trusted with his explosives by showcasing that you safely know how to use dynamite. Then the battle begins, the entire town rallying around the defense of Ringo, as the gangers get summarily demolished, bringing them down quickly as you come, to be idolized by the town of Goodsprings for your good deeds. And as Ringo promises to pay you for your actions once he reaches back to his place of work, the Crimson Caravan, you stand victorious. However, this is just one way of completing this quest. You could alternatively go talk to Cobb, convincing him to take over the town for himself, and instead of using your skills to arm the townspeople, you instead use them to help the gangers, as you follow much in the same way as the previous route, but instead leading the gangers to victory and establishing them as the key force in the town, making future travels easier by instead endearing you to the powder gangers, ensuring that they won't attack you. But that's not the only way to conclude the quest. Maybe you just want to kill everyone, which, whilst it would fail the quest, is still a perfectly valid way of dealing with the situation. New Vegas will never, and I mean never, stop you from doing something just because you want to be a genocidal maniac. You want to kill literally everyone you come across, including quest important NPCs? Go right ahead. New Vegas won't stop you, outside of making you hated by every living thing under the harsh Mojave sun. It's built around the core premise of the player having absolute and unending freedom. This idea of freedom is also reflected in the 4 paths that the player can take, story-wise, that shape how the Mojave will turn out. The NCR, the New Californian Republic, a facsimile of the old American way of life, a representative democracy, much like the US we know now. Taxes, a square meal, and a substantially sized military all cement the NCR firmly in the realm of the familiar. The NCR exists as a commentary on both the old world, but also on the downsides that attempting to resurrect the past can bring. Whilst it does offer stability in a wasteland that often lacks even the most basic structures, offering the possibility of a somewhat normal life, as normal as post-apocalyptic can offer, and a stable government, an actual centralized economy, irrigation, electricity, in the developed places at least, and seeming security provided by the sizable NCR army. However, it's not without its downsides. Being severely overstretched by the rapid expansion into the Mojave in a mad dash to secure the electricity provided by Hoover Dam, the main geopolitical objective in the region, the Mojave campaign serves as a metaphor for the downsides of the NCR as a whole. Incompetent leadership selected by fondness to the individual over meritocracy, shown by General Oliver and his closeness to the president, threatened to collapse the entire hold of the NCR over the Mojave. Ineffective bureaucracy slows the system down even more. Furthermore, the overstretched nature of the NCR's military goes to undermine the very values that make the Republic appealing, primarily that of security, as even in the area of the Mojave campaign, an area that is a key area for NCR military activity. Outposts and caravans under the protection of the Republic are attacked and destroyed without any retaliation, primarily by our next possible faction, the Legion. The Legion stands as a polar opposite to the familiarity of the NCR, instead seeking to emulate the Roman Empire of old, an all-encompassing obliterating force that assimilates all those it conquers, erasing identities of tribes and clans and turning them into the Legion way of life, all grounded by a cult of personality around the leader, known only as Caesar. Whilst it may seem unfamiliar when compared to the relative modern values of the NCR, it too stands as a monument to the old world, as much as Caesar would like to deny it, and as such the dictatorship also offers significant downsides, but there are some undeniable upsides. The most glaring being the obvious barbarity of the Legion way of life. Slavery is not only allowed, but actively encouraged, with the use of slaves forming the very backbone of Legion society and logistics. This backwards worldview extends to views on gender as well, with women outside of the courier being unable to serve in the military, being relegated to backwards traditional views on women. This backwardness continues throughout Legion society, with modern medicine and drugs being frowned upon, instead choosing to rely on herbal remedies, and even most Legion recruits bearing solely melee weapons, frowning upon ranged weapons, especially those of more advanced design. This, however, seems to be diminished the further up in rank you go, with Centurions using high-tech melee weapons, and even Caesar himself relying on a robot to try and cure his ailments, with harsh punishments for those who even commit the slightest of crimes, crucifixion being the primary method of suppression. The downsides continue, with the total obliteration of the self that the Legion seems to tout as its official modus operandi for interacting with outside clans and tribes. Upon defeat, these clans are absorbed into the Legion, where any and all previous traditions or identity is removed, through beatings and brainwashings, until they come to only see themselves as Legion. This method comes from Caesar's, once a man known as Edward Sallow's, admittedly wrong understanding of Hegelian dialectics, a theory that states when two forces, often ideological opposites, meet in battle, the ethics and ideologies of both forces will merge and at the end will create a new product, a synthesis. Sallow's understanding of this and using it as an excuse for the complete destruction of countless tribes is inherently flawed, as there is no synthesis. They have not absorbed these clans and instead merely added them onto the Legion without rhyme or reason. But Caesar's subscription to this belief is why he believes a conflict with the NCR is both inevitable and needed, to form a greater nation in the ashes of the old. However, there are also undeniable positives to the Legion, with the harsh punishments meaning that Legion lands east of the Colorado are some of the safest lands to traverse in, with Cass, an NCR citizen, even claiming that Legion roads are the safest for caravans, the potential punishments severely outweighing the possible rewards. The Legion stands as an extreme of the idea that the ends justify the means, and it stands to reason that they would come into conflict with the NCR. And whilst it is undeniable that the Legion and the NCR are fated to clash, both two massive military superpowers that are ideologically opposed, that both want the same thing, the Hoover Dam, the conflict would honestly be more akin to the Cold War than anything. The NCR lacks the manpower or the willingness to cross the Colorado and directly annex Legion land, more wanting to hold onto the fading grip they already have on the lands that they are already struggling to control. But even in the case of the Legion, whilst being willing to march into NCR territory, having the logistics and the men for it, there is one glaring flaw: Caesar himself. The Legion, under the leadership of Edward Sallow, serves as a time bomb, as he is a brain tumor that will kill him eventually, outside of intervention by the courier, and, at least in my opinion, Caesar is the linchpin of the entire operation. Without him, the whole cohesion and reason for the lack of individuality is lost, likely splintering the Legion under the weight of itself. In the end, the NCR cannot properly pursue a full-scale war with the Legion due to resource constraints, whereas the Legion cannot due to time constraints, leaving Nevada as a perfect arena for a microcosm of a conflict, an almost proxy war inside nations, if you get what I mean, neither side being able to properly or effectively escalate the conflict. But there is another force present in Nevada, that being the enigmatic Mr. House, the owner of the New Vegas Strip, and a third force that must be accounted for in the balance of power of the Mojave. Mr. House is a self-admitted autocrat who wishes to use his Securitron army, stationed underneath the Legion's primary command headquarters, to push both the NCR and the Legion out of Nevada and establish his own nation. He will achieve this by using the Platinum chip, the reason that you got shot at the beginning of the game, to upgrade his Securitrons and bring them up to the power level needed to function as a proper army capable of fighting large-scale conflicts. Mr. House stands as a third option for those unconvinced by the arguments of either other faction, and his views are in conflict of both of them, evidenced by the fact that to progress any other ending you must first kill House, and by taking him out of the picture, eliminating an otherwise unpredictable force. This likely stems from the fact that Mr. House comes from before the bombs fell, entombing himself in a status chamber and using his own defenses to prevent the bombs from hitting Vegas proper. And him being the CEO of Robco, a massive corporation that is responsible for a lot of the technology found in the world of Fallout, his ideology stems more from the likes of Henry Ford. He promises development at an unparalleled rate should he win, a return to the old world levels of technology, and then even further beyond, if only the masses will conform to his vision. Should the courier allow him to lead them into the future, colonies and space travel will be a matter of reality in just a few short decades. All you have to do is forfeit your freedom to him. However, Mr. House, like all of the endings, has his fair share of downsides. His ruthless capitalistic nature, the most obvious issue. I mean, just look at New Vegas and the surrounding Freeside. The Strip stands as this jewel of opulence, open to those who are affluent enough to spend, or influential enough, like the soldiers of the NCR, but is closed to those who live in Freeside, the area surrounding the Strip, who are poor and often disadvantaged, segregated from the Strip by a literal gate that requires you to prove wealth to pass. House is more than capable and has the resources to help the people of Freeside, but instead refuses, considering them unworthy of his help. If Mr. House is to win, this divide would only grow further and further. Whilst progress is almost certainly assured, the well-being of those in the Mojave is not, and whilst the courier would undeniably benefit, the Mojave as a whole would still be largely the same. This is not even to mention whether House could even hold the Mojave, as whilst he does have enough forces to push the initial forces out of the Mojave Desert, it's unknown if he could set up production and maintenance facilities fast enough to stop any further claims to the desert. However, control of Hoover Dam would likely help this considerably. Overall, Mr. House serves as an almost combination of the two factions, likening to this idea of a Hegelian dialectics, as he possesses the old-world American ideologies gained by being alive during the time that they were present, but also possesses the autocratic nature of the Legion, and is certainly one of the options that is available. But there is one more option, one more idea that actually relates to this idea of freedom that these other options seem to lack, and that, of course, is Yes Man. It may seem like elaborating upon all these factions is unnecessary, but I believe that it's needed to understand the freedom the game offers, not only by allowing you to choose these other factions, but also elaborating upon the levels of freedom that Yes Man allows you, as he serves as the encapsulation of freedom both narratively and from a gameplay perspective, allowing you to achieve an ending even if you choose to execute Caesar House and Ambassador Crocker. No matter how many times you kill Yes Man, he will always come back. You cannot lock yourself out of being able to finish the game just by killing people. Yes Man further demonstrates this idea of freedom as he allows you complete control over how the Mojave turns out, encapsulating this idea of self-determination to such an extent that modern games don't even try to match anymore. Do you want to kill all the side factions or befriend all of them? It's up to you ultimately, allowing you to even blow up the Securitron army that was to be your trump card, or even disabling Hoover Dam. The choice is yours, and independent New Vegas represents the most uncertain ending, with you the courier in charge, but it perfectly encapsulates this idea of freedom. Even if Vegas shall come to burn, at least it shall be free from the control of others.
Why didn't I take the job? You, courier. You were the reason.
This video was initially meant to be solely just the main game, but honestly, I can't make a New Vegas video without talking about at least one of the DLCs. However, today I will just be talking about Lonesome Road, partly for brevity, but mainly because I believe that both Dead Money and Old World Blues could honestly have their own videos, and I cannot really fit Honest Hearts thematically, so yeah. But to return to the actual DLC, Lonesome Road feels primarily like a climax, the penultimate destination, at least in canon, of the courier before the Battle of Hoover Dam, and somewhat quizzically seems to contradict the theme of freedom that I have been talking about. But to actually describe what I mean, I must first elaborate on the actual story of the DLC. It begins with a mysterious message in your Pip-Boy, beckoning you towards a place known as the Divide, a community devastated by nuclear fire, where both Legion and NCR have merged into one amalgamation of a force riddled with radiation poisoning and teeming with abominations, by an enigmatic figure known only as Ulysses. The courier, of course, obliges, fighting through the Divide against the Marked Men, the remnants of Legion and NCR forces, Tunnelers, a new mutated threat that will soon threaten the Mojave as a whole, and the general mutated fauna. We slowly come to learn more and more about Ulysses, fed to us through long-winded discussions through our hacked iBot EDE. Nah, but seriously, I know this bit's been done to death, but the amount of times this man says bear or bull is actually astounding. We learned that he was both a Legion Frumentari, a spy, and a courier just like you. In fact, he was the previous Courier 6, who was meant to carry the Platinum chip, but instead let you have it. Why? We'll find out. One key theme that Lonesome Road seems to be trying to communicate, at least in my opinion, is the wrongness of the Divide. A community ravaged by weapons of a bygone era, further exemplified by the merging of both NCR and Legion elements. It conveys a sense of profound wrongness in a way that no other DLC managed to do, at least in my opinion. That the brutal nature of the Divide has made the factions line blur and distort to the point of non-existence, all in the service of a singular objective: survival. Further continuing through the Divide, launching a pre-war nuke to clear our path, we finally learn of the reason as to why Ulysses seems to hold so much hate for the player. Long ago, before the events of New Vegas, us, the courier, had traveled to the Divide, then a newly created and prosperous settlement, free from outside influences, and had provided it with outside trade and supplies, allowing it to further flourish. However, this independence was short-lived. Its status as an alternate route into the Mojave soon drew the attention of the NCR and in turn the Legion, one wishing to turn it into an essential supply line, the other to prevent that, and as such, war came to the Divide. But once more, the courier returned to the Divide, this time with a package from the far lands of Navarro that the NCR hoped would help decipher what these mysterious silo-like buildings actually were. And in a way, it would. Once the device came into the vicinity of these silos and was opened, the prosperity of the Divide came to an abrupt end, linking with the warheads stored in these silos and causing them to launch directly into the locked silos doors, causing a chain reaction of massive nuclear explosions, rendering the Divide into the barren wasteland we know of today, transforming the promising new nation into nothing but ash, subjecting it to the exact same fate that the old world once met. It is this act that Ulysses blames us for, as it was our package that sealed the fate of the Divide, and it was our trailblazing that opened up the community to the machinations of the bear and the bull. Now, at first glance, this seems to completely contradict the idea of freedom that I've spent the entire video trying to convince you it possesses. And it does. The entirety of the DLC seems to stand as a departure from the base game's method of storytelling. The acts committed by the courier prior to the start of the game are outside of our control, and as such, we lack the freedom to stop it. But I believe that this inability to change these acts to be the most poignant moment of the DLC. That even despite the courier's past actions, he still continues, making tangible changes to the world around him, for better or for worse. Just because the courier has arguably committed grave sins in the past does not invalidate the feats for which he is now known. I believe this point is best exemplified by the ending of the DLC during the final confrontation between you and Ulysses. There are a variety of ways that this fight can go down, but it essentially boils down to this. Kill Ulysses and commandeer control over the nuclear missiles he holds dominion over, and validate his view of you, or convince him to stand down, prove that you have changed in the face of your experiences, and whilst the past cannot be changed, the actions you are responsible for will never go away, but that doesn't mean suffering has to continue. Either way this fight goes down, ultimately you are left with the choice of what to do with the nuclear warheads. Do you launch them at the Legion, devastating their war effort at Cottonwood Cove? Or do you launch them at the NCR, obliterating the Long 15, destroying any hope of a stable supply line into the Mojave? Do you sow the same devastation that you've already been responsible for? Or do you leave the warheads, deciding that they aren't the answer to your problems, and walk away? Ultimately, this decision is yours, and I think that's the beauty of not only the DLC, but the game as a whole. The choice is always yours.
Why have you done this? Fool! May there be a
Ultimately, New Vegas as a game is truly, at least in my opinion, a masterclass in not only game design, but also thematically and narratively, weaving together an integrated story of freedom, of choice, of human nature, and of the clashing of the old and the new, both from our own history, but also in the context of Fallout's universe, to even being able to extend this narrative thread into the DLCs. Especially considering the time constraints, just goes to show the masterclass in game design that New Vegas truly is. To answer the questions that I set out to explore, however, freedom is utilized within the confines of the game to make the player character feel like you are tangibly and observably altering the world around you. From the seemingly inconsequential missions that you forget about after doing, to the entire situation and future of the Mojave. Freedom is seemingly used as the one constant, both narratively and through the gameplay. It enhances the game beyond the typical Bethesda experience by properly immersing us into the world that surrounds us, that I believe has still yet to be surpassed in any Bethesda product. Additionally, the seeming subversion of this freedom that is present in Lonesome Road, and how ultimately it is a poignant message of not letting your past define the current you, and how mistakes shouldn't confine you to one path of decision making. At least, in my opinion. If you disagree, that's completely fine, but let me know in the comments what you think. But to ultimately conclude, I think that New Vegas truly does stand as a testament to what games can be. A fun game that you can turn your brain off to, but also a deep narrative with themes that we can still talk about more than a decade later, and just generally being fun. And in an era where games quality seems to be just declining more than innovating, perhaps a look back to the best of the old is exactly what we need. Perhaps all that is needed is just a bit more freedom. And that was that. Thank you so much all for watching once again. And remember, if you did enjoy at any point, please consider liking and subscribing. It's not necessary, but it would be immensely appreciated. And I do still have both Twitter and Patreon if you'd like to look further. They'll be in the description down below. But before we finish this video, I just wanted to apologize for the wait. I had some personal stuff come up that I had to deal with. Not going to say what for privacy, but it was very important. And also, I'm now back in university, so videos are definitely going to slow down a little. But I'm hoping that once I get settled in again, I can get a routine down and continue a at least somewhat steady stream. But again, sorry for the wait, and I do hope that this was worth it. But anyway, sorry for taking up so much of your time, and I do hope to see you in the next one.